What would you risk if the person you bullied in daylight turned out to be the one name your own boss would kneel to? A mild Monday pretended to be harmless. Ravello Grove Park was clean and green, lilac-sweet, sunlight scattered across the benches. Pigeons pecked under the elms. A black sedan idled in shade, rear door open, engine purring. No sirens, no shouting. Just stillness. The kind that convinces fools nothing bad is about to happen. Eleonora Viscari liked the stillness. Small and polished, hair white as salt, pearls at her throat, a charcoal jacket cut with care. A black handbag rested on her lap. Its gold clasp winked when the leaves flickered. She fed crumbs to birds with a patience older than the park. When she looked up, her eyes were pale and steady. Across the path, Damon Krell watched her like a man peering through a shop window. Scuffed jacket over a gray hoodie, tattoos on his neck, knuckles raw. Two friends trailed him, a wiry kid in a bomber and a thick-set watcher who kept eyeing the sedan. Damon's grin was a coin flip. Today it landed wrong. "Easy score," he said. "Purse like that buys a week." They drifted closer. The wiry kid hung back. The thick-set watcher squinted at the open door and shrugged. Damon saw no risk, only a story to brag about in the wrong bar. He leaned over the bench, palms on the slats. "Morning, Nonna," he said, smile thin. "How about we lighten that bag before it sprains your wrist?" Eleonora didn't flinch. "Walk on," she said softly. "There's grace here you don't understand." Damon laughed and tapped the handbag. "I understand zippers." The pigeons shuffled. A jogger looked and kept going. Two office workers slowed, decided they were not heroes, and hurried away. The sedan still waited, rear door yawning. A man sat inside with a cane across his knees, face unreadable. Damon didn't look. "Take your hand away," Eleonora said. Damon trapped the strap beneath his palm. "Tell you what," he said, "I'll carry it for you." "Close as you like." She placed one glove over the clasp and met his eyes. What she let him see wasn't fear. He mistook it for bluff. "Come on," the wiry kid murmured. "Just lift it and go." "Relax," Damon said. "She's made of biscuits." He pinched the strap. Eleonora's wrist flexed but didn't give. Damon's grin sharpened. "You've got a grip," he said. "Respect." "You've got a choice," she replied. "Take it." A wiser man would have stepped back. Damon leaned closer. "I'm taking it either way." The birds scattered, a soft thunder. The man in the sedan shifted, one polished shoe touching pavement. Damon set his other hand on the bag and tugged. Eleonora's rosary slipped from the pocket and fell with a click, the silver charm glinting, an old crest refusing to fade. "Pretty," Damon said. "Souvenir, too." He tugged again. Eleonora's elbow struck his forearm, not hard but deliberate. He recovered with a bark of laughter and pushed her shoulder a fraction. "Don't make me be the bad guy, Nonna." "You brought your own costume," she said. From the car came a single sound, the tap of a cane on asphalt, crisp as a gavel. Damon's shoulders twitched. He looked over. A tall man rose from the sedan, charcoal suit, white shirt clean as paper. Hair slicked back, expression carved from stone. He didn't hurry or speak. He simply walked, the cane keeping time. Two others appeared from the green, matching his pace. The thick-set watcher took 2 steps and vanished. Damon stayed because his ego had already spent the money he hadn't stolen. "Big car, Grandpa," Damon called, forcing bravado into a room that didn't accept his currency. "You want to donate before I do?" The man in the suit didn't glance at him. He stopped beside the bench and addressed Eleonora first, voice low enough to make the leaves listen. "Mother," he said. The word changed the air. "Are you all right?" Damon's laugh died. The cane tapped once more. The suited man finally looked at him. In those eyes lived patience and a ledger kept to the last digit. "You can put the bag down now," he said. Damon wet his lips. Pride glued his hand to the strap. "We're just talking," he said. "Now," the man repeated. Silence spread. The jogger didn't return. The birds settled. Damon's fingers felt each vein in the leather like a confession. He glanced for his friends and found absence. He looked at Eleonora and saw the faintest shake of her head. Not fear, pity. He swallowed. "Didn't mean disrespect," he tried. "Didn't know who—" "That is your problem," the man said. "You never know before you act." Damon let go. He lifted his palms. Relief flashed and vanished. One of the shadows moved closer. Damon flinched like a man who has stepped into traffic. The man with the cane weighed him with a glance, then looked back to Eleonora. "Say the word," he murmured. Eleonora exhaled. "Not here," she said. "Not for this." The tall man nodded. Verdict reached. 2 fingers flicked. The shadow retreated. Damon felt his knees again. The world restarted. Wind in leaves. The sedan purred, door still open. Damon took a step back, then another. The suited man's gaze followed without moving anything but light. "Remember the mercy," he said. "It has a cost." Damon nodded. "Yes, sir," he breathed. He turned to run. Eleonora's voice called him back without rising. "Boy." "You live today because a mother asked," she said. "Do something worth the gift." He fled. The pigeons returned. Eleonora settled her bag and fed them. The man with the cane waited. You could watch and believe power rescued frailty. You'd be wrong. To understand what truly happened on that bench, you must know who Eleonora Viscari used to be, and why old families lower their voices when they say her name, to this day still. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep these stories alive, and trust me, the best part is yet to come. Now, let's get back to it. The park returned to silence after the young man fled. Eleonora Viscari sat perfectly still, eyes tracing the edge of the path where the sunlight broke into fractured patterns across the concrete. The cane's soft tap behind her signaled Cassian's approach, but she didn't turn. The doves had settled again, calm, as if nothing had happened. "You didn't have to come out of the car," she murmured. Cassian stood beside her, hands clasped over the cane's carved head. "And let a fool touch the bloodline?" She smiled faintly. "You forget who taught you the meaning of restraint." The sound that left him was halfway between a sigh and a growl. "I learned it, Mother. I just don't always practice it." Eleonora reached for another crumb of bread and scattered it gently. "Then remember what restraint costs. Your father paid for it in blood." The breeze shifted. Cassian glanced at her, puzzled, but she was no longer in the park. Her eyes had gone far away, to a decade that still echoed in whispers. They had called her La Madre di Ferro, the Iron Mother. Back then, Naples wasn't marble and tourists. It was a chessboard of power, families carving territories like surgeons without anesthesia. Don Paolo Vescari ruled the docks and the shipping yards. His was the old way, respect through fairness, order through discipline. His wife, Eleonora, had been the quiet figure beside him at every negotiation table, until one night, when the bloodlines almost tore the city apart. It started with a missing shipment, arms from Yugoslavia gone astray. Two rival capos blamed each other, and revenge rippled faster than reason. By morning, 3 men were dead, including the nephew of Don Accardi, Paolo's oldest ally. The Accardis prepared for war. The Vescaris prepared for retaliation. But in between stood Eleonora. She entered the meeting hall on Via San Benedetto alone. No guards, no weapon, only a black veil and composure sharp enough to cut through pride. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice calm, echoing off the cracked plaster, "if you must spill blood, spill it for something worth more than ego." They laughed at first. Then she laid 2 envelopes on the table, each containing proof that the shipment had been intercepted not by either family, but by the police, tipped off by a third-party informant. "How did you get this?" Accardi asked, eyes narrowing. "Because while you men play war," she replied, "I listen to the widows." The room went silent. In that instant, they understood who truly controlled Naples, not through bullets, but through information. That night, Accardi and Vescari signed peace, their hands shaking. The newspapers wrote about a mysterious woman broker who saved the city from an unseen massacre. Inside the underworld, her name became law, La Madre di Ferro. Not because she ruled with iron, but because she bent and never broke. Paolo Vescari loved her for it and feared it. He often said she was the spine I never deserved. Together they balanced the empire. He ruled the streets, she ruled the silence. Their home on the hill above Naples was filled with marble floors and the scent of lemon oil. Yet Eleonora never allowed vanity to replace vigilance. Every night before bed, Paolo would pour her a small glass of grappa and whisper, "If the world ends tomorrow, at least we end it together." It did end, in a way. One rain-slick evening, Paolo was ambushed outside the harbor office. 2 bullets to the chest, 1 to the neck. The killer was never found, but Eleonora knew who had ordered it. She knew because the next morning, a bouquet of lilies appeared at her door. White lilies, the Accardi family's calling card. Cassian was 16 then. He stood in the parlor doorway, trembling, eyes fixed on his mother as she arranged the flowers in a vase. "You're keeping them?" he asked, voice cracking. "They're proof," she said softly. "Proof of what?" "That I can still choose not to kill." He didn't understand then. But years later, when he took his father's seat, he realized that was the first and last time he saw his mother's tears. She didn't avenge Paolo. She dismantled his enemies with patience. Within a year, Accardi's network collapsed under police scrutiny, evidence mysteriously appearing in the right hands, witnesses miraculously protected. No bullet left the Vescari estate. Yet everyone knew who had orchestrated the fall. The Iron Mother hadn't fired a single shot. She had simply waited for time to expose arrogance. Cassian grew into a man of precision and silence, mirroring her. While others built empires through intimidation, he built one through control. He watched her at dinner tables filled with men who mistook her age for gentleness. When she spoke, they leaned in. When she smiled, they exhaled. One night, when he was 20, he asked her, "How do you command without shouting?" Eleonora stirred her tea, thoughtful. "Because shouting is what you do when no one's listening. If you must be heard, make silence your ally." He nodded. She touched his cheek. "True strength speaks softly, Cassian. The loudest man in the room is always the weakest." Those words stayed with him long after he buried her husband, long after he replaced blood oaths with signed contracts, long after his rivals learned that a single phone call from Don Cassian carried more weight than a massacre. But as his empire grew, Eleonora withdrew. When the wars ended and the city turned toward wealth, she left Naples quietly, moved south to Ravello Grove, a town of fountains and elderly widows, far from the smoke of ambition. She bought a modest villa and filled it with lemon trees. Her days became routines of serenity, morning walks, letters unanswered, prayers whispered in old Latin. To the townspeople she was simply Signora Vescari, the quiet widow who fed birds at the park. They never guessed the power that once trembled at her fingertips. Cassian visited every Sunday, bringing flowers, new suits, and guarded affection. She welcomed him with coffee and advice, but she never returned to his world. "I've seen what power does to love," she once told him. "I'd rather die forgotten than adored for fear." He respected that wish. For years, her life remained untouched by violence, until today. Cassian stood beside her as the breeze carried faint echoes of the past. The park had gone quiet again, but something had shifted. The air, the light, even the silence, thicker now, aware of itself. Eleonora brushed a crumb from her lap. "I thought I buried that part of me," she said. "You didn't bury it," Cassian answered. "You just let it sleep." She turned toward him, eyes clearer than the morning sky. "And now?" "Now," he said. Someone rang the bell. Eleonora studied her hands, steady, elegant, the same hands that had once stopped wars. For a moment she saw the blood that had dried decades ago, invisible to everyone else but her. "The boy's foolishness," she murmured, "wasn't his alone. It belongs to an age that's forgotten fear of consequence. When I was young, men looked into the eyes of women like me and saw the reflection of their limits. Now they only see targets." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Then maybe they need reminding." She shook her head. "Reminders don't come through death, Cassian. They come through memory." He looked at her, uncertain. "You think the world still remembers you?" She smiled faintly. "Oh, my son. The world never forgets the mothers it fears." A dove landed near her foot, unafraid. She scattered the last crumbs from her palm. "Go home, Cassian," she said. "Let the streets whisper again. Let them tell each other that the Iron Mother still breathes." He hesitated. "And you?" "I'll finish my walk." She watched him return to the sedan, the cane's rhythm fading until only the rustle of leaves remained. Her gaze drifted toward the path where Damon Krell had fled. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started, a dog barked, and life moved on as if nothing had changed. But inside Eleonora, something ancient stirred. For 20 years she had hidden behind peace, believing silence could outlive violence. But the insult of that boy, his hand on her wrist, his ignorance, had cracked something old and unyielding within her. As the sun shifted overhead, the doves took flight again. Their wings beat like war drums, and Eleonora's reflection in the park fountain seemed younger, sharper, alive with the ghost of who she once was. The Iron Mother had awakened. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps more people discover stories like this one. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, take a deep breath, because what happens next will change everything. The sound of wings had barely faded when Damon Krell swaggered back down the path, chewing a stick of gum as if he'd earned a victory. The two men with him, Lex and Bruno, trailed close, half laughing, half watching the trees for the black sedan they still couldn't see clearly through the shade. The park was warm, gold in the light, but something about the stillness made their breath feel heavier. She's still sitting there, Bruno muttered. Like she owns the place. Damon smirked. Maybe she does. Maybe she's the mayor's grandma. Either way, we finish what we started. He said it loud enough for Eleonora to hear. She didn't look up. Her hands, pale and steady, folded neatly over her handbag. The doves she had been feeding had scattered, but she remained seated as if nothing in the world had changed. Hey, Damon called, swaggering forward. You don't just walk off on me like that. I was talking to you. Eleonora lifted her eyes, calm and cold. No, she said. You were making noise. Lex snickered. Old lady's got teeth. Damon crouched, too close now. You think you're clever? You think that look means something? You know who I am? Yes, Eleonora said softly. A boy trying to look like a man. The answer hit harder than a slap. Bruno barked a laugh, and then swallowed it when Damon's glare cut sideways. Damon reached out, his hand grazing the string of pearls around her neck. These real? He asked, flicking one with a finger. Bet they cost more than my rent. Eleonora didn't move, didn't blink. Some things, she said, you can't afford to touch. Damon leaned in, breath hot with mint and arrogance. Oh yeah? Guess I'm bad with prices. His fingers pinched the pearls lightly, tugging just enough to feel resistance. She neither flinched nor spoke. Her stillness unnerved him in ways he couldn't explain, like staring at a statue that might decide to breathe. Behind the trees, Renzo, Cassian's driver, shifted his weight. He could see everything now. The thug's hand at the woman's throat, the cruel grin, the two cowards standing back like hyenas circling their own fear. Boss, Renzo whispered, his eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror. In the back seat, Cassian Viscari watched in silence. The cane rested across his lap, fingertips pressed to the carved lion's head. His jaw was stone. Wait, he said quietly. Renzo hesitated. He's got his hands on her. Not yet, Cassian murmured. Not truly. His reflection in the window looked like a ghost, the calm before a storm that always arrived on time. Back on the path, Damon straightened, shaking his head. You know what your problem is, lady? You act like the world owes you respect just 'cause you're old. But me? He jabbed a thumb into his chest. I earn it. Eleonora's voice was ice over velvet. Respect isn't earned by noise, child. It's given by silence, the kind that follows when men learn fear. The words meant nothing to him, but the way she said them, low, measured, made something ancient stir beneath his bravado. He pushed the feeling away and laughed too loud. Fear? You think I'm scared of a handbag and some pearls? He grabbed the purse by its strap and yanked. Eleonora's grip held fast. Let go. She didn't. Her eyes didn't even blink. A thin tremor passed through the leather as both refused to release. Damon jerked harder, frustration replacing amusement. Old witch, he spat, giving the bag another tug. She rose, slow and deliberate. The movement was small, but it shifted the entire rhythm of the moment. The sunlight caught her hair like frost in flame. Last chance, she said. Damon laughed again. Too loud, too forced. You gonna curse me, Grandma? He shoved her lightly, expecting her to stumble. She didn't move. The push landed like a wave against a rock. From the sedan, Renzo's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. Boss. Cassian's voice came like a whisper across a blade. Wait. The patience cost him. His hand trembled once on the cane, a single heartbeat of rage he swallowed whole. Eleonora adjusted her jacket, Her eyes locked on Damon's. "You remind me of a boy I once knew," she said softly. "He thought he was invincible, too." They buried him in silence because no one remembered his name. "Yeah?" Damon said, sneering. "Bet you talked him to death." Her expression didn't change. No, he picked the wrong person to touch. Bruno shifted, uneasy. "Damon, man, maybe we just—" "Shut up!" Damon gripped the handbag tighter, his pulse hammering. "I said let go!" He yanked hard, twisting. The motion snapped the clasp. Something small and silver slipped free. A rosary, old and worn, clattering onto the path. Eleonora's hand loosened. She looked down, not at him, but at the fallen beads. The chain shimmered in the sunlight, catching on a charm, a small crest carved with 2 letters, V and S entwined. Renzo saw it, too. His breath stopped. The Vescary crest. The symbol no one in the underworld dared mock. In the sedan, Cassian's head tilted slightly. The sunlight glinted across the ring on his hand. "Now," he whispered. Renzo moved before the echo faded. The car door swung open with a heavy click that sliced through the park's quiet like thunder held on a leash. Birds erupted from the trees. Damon froze, one hand still clutching the torn strap. He turned slowly toward the sound. The black sedan sat there, door wide, engine humming low. A figure stepped out, not hurried, not loud, just deliberate. Polished shoes touched pavement, followed by the cane's first measured tap. Damon's throat tightened. He didn't know the man, but every nerve in his body screamed that he should. Eleonora bent and picked up the rosary. Her fingers brushed the crest, the ghost of a memory flickering behind her eyes. When she stood again, she looked not at Damon, but at the man approaching through the light. Cassian's gaze met hers briefly, and for the first time that day, something passed between them. Not surprise, not fear, but acknowledgement. Then his eyes shifted to Damon. Renzo closed the car door softly behind them. The echo of that sound carried like a final warning. Bruno whispered, "Damon, we gotta go." Damon didn't move. He couldn't. The weight of his own arrogance pinned him in place. Cassian's cane tapped again. Closer now. Eleonora slipped the rosary back into her handbag, her voice so calm it silenced even the wind. "That," she said, "was your last mistake." And though the park was still bathed in sunlight, Damon Krell felt the world grow cold around him. The silver crest on the ground caught one last flash of light, and the legend of the Iron Mother stirred, alive once more. The sound began softly, a measured rhythm of cane against stone. Tap, pause, tap. Each strike was deliberate, precise, like a heartbeat carved in authority. The park's quiet reshaped itself around that sound. The birds stopped mid-flight. Conversations on nearby benches faded. Even the leaves seemed to still, listening. Damon Krell turned, the torn strap of Eleonora's handbag dangling from his hand. The air thickened, the kind that made the skin crawl before the mind caught up. From between the trees, Cassian Vescari emerged. Black suit, black shoes, black cane, an apparition sculpted in control. 2 men followed a few steps behind, silent and broad-shouldered, their eyes fixed ahead. They didn't move like bodyguards. They moved like consequences. Cassian's pace never changed. The cane tapped again. Tap. Pause. Tap. Damon's chest tightened. Something deep in his instincts screamed that this was wrong, that he'd just walked into a story where people like him didn't get a final line. "Who the hell—" he started, but the words caught. Cassian stopped a few feet away, his gaze moving first to the broken clasp, then to the rosary glinting faintly at Damon's feet. His expression didn't shift, but his silence carried a weight that bent the air. "Put it down, Damon," he said. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Each syllable landed like a command written in stone. Damon blinked. What did you say?" "I said," Cassian repeated, still calm, "put it down." Lex and Bruno froze. One of them whispered, "Damon, that's Viscari." The name cracked through the tension like lightning through glass. Both men stepped back instinctively, retreating without a word. Damon turned, disbelief etched across his face. "Viscari?" he echoed. "You're joking, right?" But Cassian didn't joke. His cane touched the ground again. Tap, tap, the rhythm of inevitability. "Your friends are smarter than you," he said evenly. "They've already begun to run." Indeed, when Damon looked over his shoulder, the path was empty. His crew had vanished like smoke. Only Eleonora remained on the bench, still regal, untouched by chaos. Cassian took another step forward. "You didn't ask who she was before you touched her," he said. "That's your first mistake." Damon swallowed hard, but the air refused to move down his throat. "Look, I didn't know—" "That's the second mistake," Cassian interrupted. "You never know." He didn't raise his voice. The restraint in his tone was more dangerous than rage could ever be. He gestured slightly with the cane, not as a threat, but as punctuation. "Do you make a habit," he asked, "of putting your hands on women?" "No, sir, I wasn't—" Cassian's eyes darkened, his composure carved from something older than fear. "You were." He moved past Damon as though dismissing a shadow, lowering himself to one knee beside his mother. The movement was reverent, almost ritualistic. The cane lay across his lap like an extension of his spine. "Did he hurt you?" he asked quietly. Eleonora looked at him, her expression steady. "No," she said. "He hurt himself." Cassian's jaw flexed once, a ripple of fury barely contained. Then he smiled, not with warmth, but with precision, the kind of smile men give right before they decide your future is over. He stood. "That," he said softly, "was the third mistake." Damon took a step back. "Please, I didn't mean—" Cassian's gaze silenced him. "Intent is for the innocent. You're not innocent. You're ignorant." The cane lifted slightly, then dropped once more, tap, a signal more ancient than words. From the edges of the park, shadows began to move. Men in dark coats emerging from nowhere, from the trees, from the path, from the sedan that had looked empty minutes ago. They came without hurry, faces unreadable. Damon spun, panic igniting behind his ribs. Where'd they come from?" Cassian didn't answer. He adjusted his cufflink, the faint click louder than Damon's heartbeat. Renzo approached from behind the sedan, his movements fluid, efficient. He stopped beside Cassian, nodding once, awaiting command. Eleonora's voice broke the silence. "Cassian," just his name, soft, maternal, yet absolute. Cassian turned slightly toward her. The fury in his chest subsided like a tide retreating on command. "He's learned his lesson," she said. "Don't cheapen it with blood." Her tone left no room for debate. Cassian exhaled slowly, the veins in his hand easing their tension. He looked at Damon, who was trembling now, every muscle caught between fight and collapse. If she hadn't spoken, Cassian said, you'd already be gone. He stepped closer, the cane's tip stopping an inch from Damon's shoe. You touched something sacred today. Remember that when you wake tomorrow, if you can. Damon's knees buckled. He stumbled back, shaking his head. I swear I didn't know. I didn't. Cassian's hand shot up, palm open. The park went silent again. Even the wind seemed to pause. Enough, Cassian said. His guards froze mid-step, the discipline of soldiers trained to obey silence as language. Eleonora rose then, her grace undisturbed, as if the chaos had been part of a script she'd written long ago. She adjusted her pearls, brushed a leaf from her sleeve, and glanced toward her son. Take me home, she said. Cassian nodded. Of course. He offered his arm. She took it, calm as a queen returning from ceremony. Together they turned toward the sedan. The guards parted to clear their path, heads bowed. Damon remained rooted where he stood, too afraid to run, too ashamed to speak. When Cassian reached the car, he paused and looked back once more. You walk away today because she allows it, he said. Don't ever mistake mercy for weakness. He gave a small nod. At once, the men who'd surrounded Damon dissolved back into the park's shadows, as if swallowed by the earth itself. The sound of the cane returned, marking each step toward the waiting car. Tap, pause. Tap. Damon's body began to shake uncontrollably. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The door closed with a muted thud. The sedan rolled away, black and gleaming under the sun, leaving only silence and the faint scent of lilac on the breeze. For a long moment, Damon stood frozen in the emptiness they left behind. Then he looked down, at the path, at the scattered beads of the rosary, one of them cracked beneath his boot. He dropped to his knees, his breath hitching. The silver crest stared back at him, its engraved letters, V and S, gleaming like an accusation. In that reflection, he saw everything, his arrogance, his ignorance, his fall. And in the fading echo of the cane's last tap, Damon Krell understood that he hadn't just crossed a line. He had stepped into history, and history never forgave. The car hadn't gone far before Cassian lifted his hand, signaling Renzo to stop. The brakes whispered, the tires crunching softly over gravel. The park stretched silent outside, but Cassian could still see the figure of Damon Krell kneeling near the bench, small, shaking, swallowed by the shadow of his own stupidity. Cassian's jaw flexed. Stay here, he said, voice low. Renzo didn't argue. He'd seen that look before, the storm behind the marble. Cassian stepped out again, the door closing with a sound that echoed finality. The air felt colder now, though the sun still burned high. His men had already begun to move, silent phantoms sliding between trees. They didn't need words. The order lived in their eyes. By the time Cassian reached the clearing, Damon had been dragged to the far side of the path. He was on his knees again, hands bound behind him with a strip of his own torn jacket. One of the guards pressed a gun against the back of his skull. Cassian's pace didn't quicken, but his fury was a pulse now, visible in the clench of his hand around the cane. He stopped before the boy and looked down. You took what wasn't yours. You touched what you didn't understand. That's how men like you die. Damon whimpered something that wasn't quite a word. Cassian tilted his head. You want forgiveness? The boy nodded desperately. Cassian's expression didn't change. Then you'll have to earn it in hell. He turned slightly. Do it. The gun cocked. And then, Cassian. The word wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a cathedral bell. Every man froze. The sound of the hammer eased back. Even the wind stopped between the trees. Eleonora stood a few paces away, her figure framed by the fading gold of the afternoon light. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't moved quickly. Yet somehow she had arrived before the first trigger could be pulled. "Mother," Cassian said, barely containing the sharp edge in his tone. "You shouldn't—" "Don't tell me where I should be," she interrupted softly. She walked past the guards. None dared stop her. Her heels tapped on the path, unhurried, the same measured grace that had once made entire rooms of killers lower their guns. Eleonora stopped beside her son and looked at Damon, the trembling, broken thing kneeling in the dirt. She studied him the way one might study a monument to foolishness. Cassian gestured toward him. "He disrespected you." Her gaze shifted to her son, calm but cutting. "And you think death will fix that?" He hesitated. "You taught me mercy, Mother." But he put his hands on you. "Yes," she said. "And you think that means he wins if we kill him?" Cassian blinked. He mocked the family. "Then let mercy be my revenge." The phrase struck him like a blade turned inward. Eleonora stepped closer to Damon, the edge of her skirt brushing the dirt near his knees. "You wanted to prove yourself," she said quietly. "You wanted power." "Look at me." Damon couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the ground. "Look," she said again, sharper, almost commanding. When he finally lifted his head, she saw tears forming beneath the filth and fear. "This," she said, gesturing around them, "is what power looks like when it's spent by fools. You wanted to be feared, and now you are, but not for your strength, only your stupidity." Cassian watched, his anger shifting into something heavier, something he didn't want to name. "Mother," he said, "the world doesn't learn through kindness." Eleonora turned toward him, her eyes the color of cold steel. "No, my son. The world learns through fear, and fear isn't born from death. It's born from knowing you could die but didn't." The silence between them was sharp enough to draw blood. Cassian looked away first. He remembered suddenly another time. A room lit by oil lamps, a long table heavy with men and pistols. 2 families, the Rossinis and the Vescari, seconds from slaughtering each other over a dead cousin and a broken deal. Eleonora had walked in alone, just as she did now. "Enough," she had said. One word, no threats, no raised hand, and every gun had lowered. Cassian, a teenager then, had stood by the door, frozen in awe. Later he'd asked how she did it. "Because," she told him, "men like that don't fear bullets. They fear being remembered as children who couldn't obey a mother's voice." He had never forgotten it. And now, standing before her again, he saw that same power burning quietly through her restraint. Eleonora knelt slightly so her eyes were level with Damon's. "Tell me," she whispered, "do you still think I'm just an old woman on a bench?" He shook his head, words failing. "Good," she said, "because old women have longer memories than graves." She rose and turned to her son. "Unbind him." Cassian frowned. "What?" "Do it." His men hesitated. Cassian gave a reluctant nod, and the ropes fell away. Damon stayed on his knees, too terrified to move. Eleonora studied him a moment longer. "You'll leave this town tonight," she said. "You'll tell no one what you saw. But every time you hear a cane tap, you'll remember this sound." She lifted her hand slightly. Cassian struck his cane once against the path. Tap. Damon flinched so violently he almost fell. Eleonora turned back to Cassian. He walks. Fear will teach him what death cannot. For a long second, Cassian said nothing. Then, finally, he exhaled. His fury folded into resignation. As you wish. The guards stepped back, fading into the distance like phantoms uncalled. Damon stumbled to his feet. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Why let me go? Eleonora's answer was soft, but the chill in it could have frozen the sun. Because punishment isn't always pain. Sometimes it's living long enough to understand what you nearly lost. He nodded quickly, backing away. Then he turned and ran, the kind of run a man never stops hearing in his dreams. Cassian watched him vanish into the trees. You spared him, he said. I spared you, Eleonora replied. He frowned. Me? Yes, she said, because if you'd killed him, the world would see that even I couldn't teach you restraint. And then they'd stop fearing you and start pitying you. Pity, Cassian, is the death of kings. He was silent for a while, the words settling into the heavy rhythm of his heartbeat. Then he nodded. Understood. Eleonora touched his cheek lightly. Good. Then take me home. There's no dignity in lingering after mercy. He offered his arm again. She accepted it. Together they walked toward the sedan. The light had dimmed, the park returning to its quiet self as if nothing had happened. But the stillness that followed them wasn't peace. It was awe. Behind them, the wind carried the faintest whisper of the cane's echo. And though Damon Krell was already far from Ravello Grove, he would hear that sound for the rest of his life. A heartbeat of fear reminding him of the day he met Mercy, and mistook it for death. By dawn, Ravello Grove was breathing a different kind of air. The wind carried stories instead of leaves, retellings, embellishments, half-truths shaped into gospel by trembling lips. By breakfast, the bakers knew. By noon, the dockhands whispered. By nightfall, every tavern, warehouse, and poker den in the district had repeated the same impossible sentence. A fool touched the Dawn's mother and lived. The words moved faster than money, faster than fear. In a world built on silence, gossip was the closest thing to thunder. At La Sirena, a smoke-choked gambling den by the waterfront, 3 men sat hunched over their cards, the ashtrays full and the whiskey untouched. You hear about the park? One asked. Another nodded, eyes darting toward the door. Yeah. Said the old lady didn't even flinch. Just looked at him like death forgot his name. Who was she? The youngest whispered. The oldest man took a slow drag of his cigar and exhaled. Eleonora Viscari, he said. The Iron Mother. Silence followed. Not reverence, fear wearing respect's coat. Across town, a warehouse foreman stopped mid-instruction when he heard the rumor. He removed his cap, crossed himself once, and muttered, May God bless her hands, and curse the idiot who made her raise them. By night, the name Eleonora Viscari had been spoken so many times, it became a prayer and a warning. Inside the Viscari estate, the marble halls were unusually quiet. The long table in the dining room, once used for war councils and peace treaties, now hosted only one conversation. Hushed, tense, and dangerous. Cassian sat at the head, fingers steepled beneath his chin, listening as his lieutenants debated in circles. She spared him, said Vito, a man whose loyalty was measured by how many bodies he'd buried. With respect, Don, that shows weakness. Mercy has a price, added Lando, the family's strategist. The streets may see it as a sign the Vescari name is softening. Rivals could test us. Cassian's gaze didn't waver. You think mercy is softness? I think mercy invites blood, Lando said carefully. Men only respect what they fear. Cassian leaned back, silent for a moment. The light from the chandelier cut across his features, splitting them between shadow and fire. Then he said, "You're wrong." The room stilled. He rose slowly, the cane's tip clicking once against the floor. Men respect what they don't understand. And none of you understand her. He looked from one man to the next, voice steady but dangerous. She commanded me to stop. And I did. Not because I'm weak, because she built what you call fear. She turned chaos into discipline when you were still thieves in alleys. So if she commands peace, we obey. No one spoke. Even the air seemed careful. Cassian's eyes drifted toward the window, to the faint reflection of his mother's portrait in the glass, her younger face caught forever between kindness and authority. "You measure power in corpses," he murmured. "She measures it in restraint." When he sat again, no one argued. The meeting ended without another word. Elsewhere, Damon Krell didn't sleep. He hadn't since the park. The moment replayed in his mind, her voice, her eyes, the sound of the cane striking once. He stayed inside, curtains drawn, lights off. The city outside was loud, but in his apartment the silence pressed against his chest like weight. His friends, Lex, Bruno, hadn't returned since that day. Their numbers were disconnected, their rooms empty. The streets had erased them, as if Ravello Grove itself had swallowed every witness. He'd stopped trying to reach anyone. Even his reflection frightened him. Sometimes, when he passed the mirror, he swore he saw her face, not angry, not cruel, just knowing. By the third night, paranoia set in like fever. He jumped at the creak of the floorboards, at car doors slamming outside. He stopped opening his windows. Every sound was an echo of the park. Every breath was the cane tapping in rhythm with his guilt. When he finally slept, the dreams came in fragments, her whisper, "You live because a mother still believes in mercy." He'd wake sweating, clutching his chest, half expecting to see that black sedan parked beneath his window. At midnight on the 5th day, it happened. A soft scrape at the door, faint, deliberate. Damon froze, every muscle locked. The city hummed below, 1,000 lives moving past his fear. He waited. Nothing. Then, a second sound. The low slide of paper across wood. He crept closer, hands trembling, and stared at the envelope resting on the floor. Black. No seal, no name. For a long time he didn't touch it. Then curiosity, or maybe conscience, forced him to crouch. Inside, one photograph. It showed him kneeling in the park, head bowed, shoulders caved in. Behind him, Cassian Viscari's shadow stretched across the ground like a crown of judgment. Beneath the photo, a single note written in looping cursive. "Strength is knowing when to stop." He stared at the initials until the letters blurred. Then he sank to the floor, the envelope still clutched in his shaking hands. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. In that moment, Damon understood what every man in Ravello Grove already knew, that mercy from the Viscari name was not forgiveness. It was a sentence without a date. By the next morning, the city's whispers changed again. They no longer said, "The Don's mother spared him." They said, "The Don's mother sent him a message." Some said she'd blessed him. Others swore it was a curse. No one knew the truth, and no one wanted to. At La Sirena, the gambler who'd spoken first raised his glass. "To the Iron Mother," he said. The room fell silent before anyone dared repeat it. Then, slowly, glasses lifted. "To the Iron Mother," they echoed, voices low, respectful, almost devout. Outside, the morning light broke over the rooftops of Ravello Grove, washing the cobblestones in gold. Somewhere far away, a cane tapped once, soft, distant, final. And across that city, every man who'd ever called himself powerful remembered the rule carved in silence by Eleonora Viscari herself. Mercy was not weakness. It was the highest form of control. Damon hadn't left his apartment in 2 days. The black envelope lay open on the table, its single note smoothed out from where his trembling hands had crumpled it. The photograph stared up at him. The image of himself kneeling, small beneath Cassian's shadow. He had read the words 100 times. Strength is knowing when to stop. They echoed when he tried to eat, when he tried to sleep, when he looked out the window at the streetlights bleeding through fog. He whispered them aloud sometimes, as if saying them enough might unlock their meaning. But each time they came back to him like a riddle he wasn't built to solve. He had always thought strength meant motion, fists, noise, dominance. Now he wasn't sure if he'd ever really been strong at all. The streets outside had changed, or maybe it was only his vision of them. Where once he had swaggered through alleys and shouted across corners, now he felt eyes follow him, quiet, knowing. Every conversation he overheard in the bar, every half-laugh that died when he entered, sounded like his name. Damon Krell, the fool who touched the Don's mother. He'd tried to leave town that morning, packed a single bag, cash in his jacket, head down. But the bus driver at the terminal had shaken his head. "Not you," he'd said flatly. No explanation, no eye contact. Just a refusal, spoken like a death sentence. At the next stop, the same thing happened. By nightfall, Damon realized that whatever strings ruled the underworld also ruled his exile. His name had become a curse. He walked home in silence, every echo of his footsteps whispering accusation. When he passed the park gates, he turned his face away. He couldn't bear the memory. The doves scattering, the cane's tap, her eyes. That night, he dreamed again. The park was empty, cloaked in fog. Eleonora stood in the center of it, her silver hair glowing faintly in the pale light. She didn't speak. She only looked at him, and somehow that was worse than shouting. When he tried to explain himself, no sound came out. When he tried to kneel, his legs wouldn't move. And then she whispered, a sound like winter wind across glass. "Strength," she said, "isn't in your fists. It's in the space between them." He woke, gasping. The note was still on the table, the ink gleaming faintly in the moonlight. He couldn't take it anymore. By dawn, he was walking again, back toward the park, back toward the scene of his humiliation. The streets felt longer than before, as if the city itself wanted to test him one last time. Every corner was familiar, but every face turned away. When he reached the park gates, the air was soft and cold. The doves were already there, gathered beneath the same bench. And there she was, Eleonora Viscari, the Iron Mother, her calm composure undisturbed by time or consequence. She sat the same way she had that day, straight-backed, elegant, the sun folding gently against her shoulders. In her lap, a paper bag rustled softly as she fed the birds piece by piece. Damon froze several paces away. He didn't know what he'd planned to say. There were no words big enough to fill the space between who he was and what he'd done. So he dropped to his knees. No one had ordered him to. No gun pressed to his skull, no threat hanging in the air. He simply knelt, quietly, fully, the way a man kneels when he has nothing left to defend. Eleonora didn't look up right away. She placed another crumb down, then another. The doves fluttered and cooed, their wings brushing against her skirt. Finally her voice came, calm as ever. "Why are you here?" He swallowed hard. "To say sorry." "For what?" she asked. He hesitated. For being who I was." Now she turned. Her eyes were the same piercing blue he remembered, the kind that stripped away lies until nothing but the truth remained. "And who are you now?" Damon opened his mouth, but no answer came. She regarded him for a moment, then sighed softly. "You still don't know. That's fine. Knowing takes longer than regret." The words cut deeper than any insult could have. She turned her attention back to the birds. "Do you know why I feed them every morning?" she asked. He shook his head. "They live without fear," she said. "They don't remember who tried to hurt them yesterday. They just return when the sun does. That's their wisdom, and their strength." He stared at the ground, tears burning behind his eyes. "You should have let him kill me." Eleonora's expression didn't change. "You're not dead, Damon. You're living with truth. That's harder." He nodded slowly. The breeze carried the faint smell of lilac again, the same as that morning, that cursed, sacred morning. After a long silence, she spoke again. "You finally learned who you are." Damon looked up, startled. "Have I?" Her gaze softened, not kind, but honest. "You're a wolf who thought killing made you strong. Now you've seen what it means to kneel. Keep that memory. It's the only thing that can save you." He bowed his head again, not from fear this time, but understanding. For a while, neither of them spoke. Only the rustle of feathers and the steady rhythm of her breath filled the air. When she rose from the bench, Damon did not follow. Eleonora brushed a bit of seed from her hands and looked down at him one last time. "Redemption," she said quietly, "is not my gift to give. It's yours to earn." Then she turned and walked away, her steps slow but sure, her shadow stretching across the cobblestones like the end of a story that didn't need to be told. Damon stayed where he was, the earth cool beneath his knees, the echo of her words settling into his bones. Above him, the doves lifted into the sky, a burst of white against the morning sun. He watched until they disappeared into the light, and for the first time in his life, Damon Krell didn't feel hunted. He felt human. The rain came softly that night, a silver whisper against the tiled roof of Eleonora's house. The same house where Cassian had grown up, where the smell of jasmine and old wood still lingered, where silence had never felt oppressive, only deliberate. He stood at her door for a moment before knocking, cane in hand, rain clinging to his coat. The lights were dim inside, a single lamp glowing from the parlor window. When the door opened, she was there, unchanged, it seemed, though the years had carved gentleness into her severity. "Cassian," she said simply, as if she'd known he'd come. He nodded, removing his hat. "You're still awake." "Sleep is for those with nothing left to think about," she replied. "Come in." He followed her through the narrow hall, past photographs of their family. His father, Paolo, in his prime, stern-faced beside her younger self. The scent of bergamot tea drifted faintly through the air. She poured him a cup before he asked. He accepted it, though his hands were too restless to enjoy it. They sat across from each other, the space between them filled with history. For a while, neither spoke. The fire cracked softly in the grate, and the rain traced its rhythm against the glass. Finally, she said, "You look tired." "I am," he admitted. "But not from work." Eleonora studied him, eyes narrowing slightly. No, from the weight of what you've built. Cassian smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. You warned me once that empires grow teeth faster than they grow conscience. And yet you kept feeding it, she said. He nodded. Because I thought it made me safe. I thought power meant protection, that if I controlled enough, lost enough sleep, silenced enough enemies, I could keep this family untouchable. And now? He looked into his tea as though the answer might rise from the steam. Now I think I just became another kind of prisoner. Eleonora leaned back. You built an empire, Cassian. But don't let it bury you. The words settled like scripture. He set his cup down carefully, his voice lower now. Without you, I would have been just another killer. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. You were always more than that. You just had to remember who you learned from. He looked at her, the lamplight painting soft gold across her face. You think I've forgotten? No, she said, but you've forgotten why. Cassian said nothing. The fire popped once, sending a small burst of sparks up the chimney. Then she spoke again, her voice turning inward, as if addressing a memory rather than him. Do you remember the night they came for you? He frowned. Which one? The one in Naples, she said, when the council tried to replace you after your father's death. Cassian's eyes darkened. I remember. You remember the gunfire. The betrayal. She looked at him steadily. But you don't remember what came before it, when I told you to stay inside the cellar and not make a sound. He blinked, the memory resurfacing like something dredged from the bottom of a lake. You went out there, he said slowly. I had to, she said. They weren't coming for the name. They were coming for my son. Cassian's hand tightened around his cane. You killed them. Eleonora's gaze was steady. No, I made them leave. He frowned. How? She sipped her tea, unbothered by the question. By reminding them that I was the one who made their peace possible years before they learned to use a gun. That if they spilled blood in my home, I'd make their families drown in shame before morning. He leaned back, silent. Eleonora continued, voice soft but firm. Power doesn't survive by fear, Cassian. It survives by memory. People don't obey you because they're afraid. They obey you because they remember what happens when you're tested. He looked down. And what happens when they forget? Then you teach them again, she said, but not with bullets, with patience. With control. The words echoed the lesson he had watched her teach in the park only days ago. He exhaled. I want to end it, Mother. Her eyes lifted. And what? The life, he said. The families. The councils. The silence and the smoke. I'm tired of men calling me Dawn with fear instead of respect. Eleonora studied him for a long time. You think you can walk away? I think I can start to, he said. Hand off what needs to be handed off. Turn what's left into something clean. Clean, she repeated, almost wistful. You've spent your life building walls, Cassian. Clean hands aren't made by washing blood away. They're made by not spilling more. I know, he said quietly. That's why I came. For the first time that night, something like warmth crossed her face. She reached forward and rested her hand over his, the same hand that had signed decrees, held weapons, silenced entire wars with a gesture. When your father died, she said, I feared you'd lose yourself to the men who praised you. But I was wrong. You only lost yourself to your own shadow. He nodded slowly, Maybe it's time I step out of it. Eleonora looked at his cane, a symbol of both power and wound. Her fingers brushed it lightly. Then start with peace. He froze at the words. They were simple, but they carried the finality of command. The firelight flickered against the walls, painting them in amber and memory. Cassian felt something unclench in his chest, something that had been locked there for decades. He finished his tea. The rain had stopped, leaving the world hushed and clean. When he rose to leave, she stood with him. "Whatever comes next," she said, "don't forget who you are." He smiled faintly. "Your son." "No," she corrected gently. "A man who finally understands what power is for." He kissed her hand before he turned toward the door. Outside, the night smelled of rain and jasmine. The city lay below him, restless, beautiful, full of ghosts. As Cassian walked to his car, he looked once over his shoulder. Through the window, Eleonora still stood in the lamplight, hand resting on the cane he had left behind. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. The old world guiding the new, one generation teaching another how to stop before the darkness swallowed them whole. And for the first time in years, Cassian Viscari walked away without his cane. Weeks passed, and Ravello Grove began to breathe again. The tension that once lived in the alleyways dissolved into quiet. Not forgetfulness, but peace earned through fear, respect, and time. The park returned to its rhythm. Children laughed again near the fountain. Vendors reopened their stalls. The story of that afternoon, though softened by retelling, still hung in the air like incense. Some said the Iron Mother had cursed the boy. Others said she had blessed him. But no one dared say her name without lowering their voice. Damon Krell was seen again, not on corners or in bars, but behind a small wooden desk in the basement of a charity house. The sign above the door read, "The Vescary Foundation for Renewal." He didn't run it. He swept its floors, stocked supplies, and carried boxes for the women who managed the ledgers. Sometimes, when no one was looking, he lingered by the window and watched the people he once would have robbed. The money that kept the lights on came from Cassian Viscari, though his name appeared nowhere on the documents. Officially, the funds came from private donors. Unofficially, every man in Ravello Grove knew what that meant. It was the Don's way of rewriting his story, through quiet repair instead of conquest. When Damon arrived on his first day, a clerk handed him a uniform, plain gray, no markings. Inside the pocket was a note, unsigned. Mercy builds slower than fear, but it lasts longer. He didn't need to guess who sent it. Across town, the empire was changing too. Cassian Viscari stood in the warehouse that had once served as his family's hub for smuggling. It was almost empty now. Crates had been removed, accounts closed, the walls that had echoed with coded orders and the weight of 1,000 silent deals now only carried the sound of seagulls from the harbor. Renzo, his driver and oldest aide, stood nearby, uncertain. "Sir, are you sure?" Cassian nodded once. This was built to survive war, but all wars do is feed themselves. "And the others?" "They'll adapt," Cassian said, "or they'll fall. Either way, they won't do it under my flag." He turned toward the door, his footsteps slow but sure. Mother was right. You don't need to rule to protect. Renzo didn't reply. He didn't need to. He simply opened the car door when they reached the street, and for the first time, the Don gave no instructions on where to go. In Ravello Grove, whispers about Eleonora Viscari had transformed into something more like prayer. The market women said she could calm storms. The young men who once bragged about their toughness now crossed themselves when they saw her walk by. To the old ones, she was still La Madre de Ferro. To the younger, she was a myth, the saint who taught even the devil's own son how to kneel. She never corrected them. Eleonora still lived in her modest house at the edge of town. She still brewed her tea at dawn, still walked the same stone path to the park, still fed the doves. Time hadn't touched her posture or her poise. The world had simply adjusted around her. Sometimes passing strangers greeted her. Most didn't. But all slowed their pace, as if proximity to her demanded reverence. It wasn't fame that surrounded her. It was silence. The same silence that once ruled boardrooms and blood feuds now lived in the gentle sway of her hand, scattering breadcrumbs. Late one afternoon, Cassian returned to the park. He didn't step out of the black sedan this time. The door stayed closed, engine quiet, windows half-shaded. Through the glass, he watched her, his mother, framed by the same fading light that had blessed that day of reckoning. The same bench, the same doves. Only now the air felt different, not heavy, but settled. Eleonora's movements were slower now, but deliberate, as if every motion still carried purpose. The children nearby laughed freely again, unafraid. The old men who played chess under the trees nodded to her, respectful, but at ease. Renzo glanced toward Cassian in the rearview mirror. "She looks well," he said softly. Cassian's eyes didn't leave her. "She's more than well. She's free." He leaned back, resting both hands on his knees. For once his cane wasn't beside him. He'd left it behind in her home, a relic of burden she'd taught him to outgrow. "She told me once," Cassian said quietly, "that silence is the highest form of power." Renzo smiled faintly. "Then she still rules this city." Cassian nodded. "And I serve under her crown." Eleonora glanced up briefly, as if sensing his gaze from across the distance. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Mother and son, queen and heir. She didn't smile, but she didn't have to. The faint tilt of her head was enough. Cassian felt something unclench inside him. Not pride, not sorrow, just understanding. The kind that doesn't need words. He watched her finish scattering the last of the crumbs. The doves circled once above her before settling again. The park's light shifted, turning everything gold. For a long while, Cassian stayed there, saying nothing, doing nothing, just watching. When Eleonora finally rose from the bench, the sun caught the silver in her hair, and it gleamed like a crown no one had placed but everyone could see. Cassian exhaled softly. "That's my mother," he murmured. The car didn't move until she was safely home. As night fell, Ravello Grove quieted. The air smelled of lilac and rain. Somewhere, a church bell rang. Somewhere else, a dove took flight. The city that once trembled under the Viscari name now slept under its mercy. Eleonora's legend would outlive them all, not written in ledgers or bloodlines, but in the memory of those who'd watched power choose stillness over war. And in the park, under the same oak that had witnessed both arrogance and grace, her bench remained empty, waiting for morning, for the next handful of crumbs, for the quiet that ruled everything. In a world ruled by fear, the loudest power was still her silence.